Well, just from a playing point of view, I mean, just the amount of players they have, they can't. One of the things that I've learned there is and it's a spoiled thing in South Africa. If a boy drops an up and under, we say, oh, he's terrible. If a boy can't pass, we say, ag, hy kan nie pass nie, ons moet hom, jy weet, hy het swak hande. If the guy lacks pace, we go, oh, nee, hy's nie vinnig genoeg nie. So we just go and find someone else. Now in Australia, if I had that theory, I would have no players, because it doesn't work like that in my country, and I'm talking about where I coach now in Australia. You've got to teach that guy to catch up and unders, and you've got to find a way in which you can improve his hands, and you've got to get a speed coach to actually get him to be quicker over 10 and 50 meters. I mean, we work with the Institute of Sport in Canberra, and we get athletic coaches to coach them to run quicker over 10 meters, and then they get plyometrics training and weights training that complement their speed work. So those things about, it's not just, as I said, it's not just that it's a different environment. I mean, I think it's sad that a team like the Lions, who have got so much history and so much tradition, just automatically just get wiped out of the existence. If you think about it, that doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. There's no ways in the world that Auckland Blues will ever get kicked out of Super Rugby in New Zealand. It'll never happen. And if you consider that 15 years ago, the Lions, at that stage were Transvaal, were the strongest rugby union in the world. So literally 15 years later, they got no place in rugby. I mean, that's absurd. And then again, I go back to, well, who's made this decision, and why did it take a whole year to make this decision? And then when you make the decision, you say the other team can have 1 year. I mean, that's not a decision, I think that, as I said, I mean, it's one nice thing about the whole thing is we play the Kings in Canberra next year. If they could put the best 150 players in a room and say, right, coaches, you pick your 30, you want 30, 30, 30, I don't think South Africa would ever lose Super Rugby competition, because you can't have a situation where you've got 7 locks at the Bulls who don't play Super Rugby, and 5 centres at the Stormers who don't play Super Rugby, and 4 Sharks loose forwards who don't play Super Rugby. You can't have that. I mean, you can't sit in a country like this where you've got to wait for 4 injuries before you can play Super Rugby. I mean, you should have the best 150 players. Coaches have to hang their hat on the thing and say, right, I want Bobby Skinstad as my 8. Right, you sure? Rip, right, then I'm going to take, Willem Alberts as my number 8. But you can't, he's at the Sharks as well.
Has someone already said that
that's
they want
just
me
the way
as
it
number
is.
8?
Well, I said, I'm going to pick you again, Bobby. I'm going to bring you and John Smith back. That'll be headlines in the field.
There's a headline right there.
But when you sign on the dotted line as Springbok coach, you will always, doesn't matter who you are, you will always veer to where you come from. And so he will go the Bulls way. He will pick Bulls players. And the reason is because, as I said to you, you get 2 kinds of coaches, ones who have and ones who will. And if he's going to get fired, he might as well do it the way that he's comfortable doing it. And he's going to go back to the way that he's comfortable doing it by doing it the way that he's done it with the Bulls. So, people that are debating and saying, but why does he do it like that, Jake? Or, reading in the papers, what's the question about Heineken? Do you think he'll change? He's not going to change. I'll tell you right now, you picked him as the coach. You picked him on the basis that he was a good Super 15 coach and he won the tournament with the Bulls. You picked him because he was a successful Super Rugby coach playing that style of rugby. You picked him because he's been on the short list for 3 coaches now and he didn't have to apply. He got the job. You must accept that that was what you picked him for. So, as much as you're now saying, but shouldn't he change and can't he get out of this and shouldn't he, he's not going to. I mean, that's why you appointed him. You appointed him on the basis that that's what he was good at. Now, whether that's going to be good enough to win tests, whether that's going to be good enough to win a World Cup, whether that's going to be good enough to develop the players we have, whether that's going to be seen as biased by the public and by the media, well, that's what you're going to have to live with, because there's no ways that he's not going to be true to his word and do what he thinks is what he was picked for in the first place. They've changed everything that they've worked out doesn't work for New Zealand. They've brought in the new coaches. They've learned from Graham Henry. They've brought in this. They've won a World Cup. They stick with those guys. We reinvent the wheel again. We start all over again. No, we'll do it my way. Axel Julle Weiss. And as long as that continues, guys, I mean, we're all passionate supporters here, and I appreciate that you guys you love your rugby, but it's just we can't carry on like this, because I'll tell you what's going to happen. Watch this space. Coach is going to get fired. You can take it as done. I already got an email saying that everyone's belittling him, and there's a letter to Pat Lambie and all this cuck that's going around. He's been the coach for 5 games. He's unbeaten. And everyone's making a joke about him. What do you think is going to happen when they lose twice to New Zealand? I mean, they're going to kill the poor guy, you know. So the reality is, it's going to be another history repeating itself. And he'll be sitting here in 2 years' time doing a breakfast going, no, John, I also think, because John de Villiers will be sitting there as well.
I'll be playing.